The Metabox P970EF is a powerful 17-inch laptop while being in a thinner Clevo chassis, so let's find out what's on offer in this detailed review. I'll be looking at gaming performance, thermals, overclocking, battery life, and basically everything in between to help you decide if it's worth buying. Starting with the specs, my unit has an Intel i7-8750H CPU, Nvidia RTX 2070 Max-Q graphics, 32GB of memory running in dual channel, a 17.3-inch 1080p 144Hz screen, and a 500GB M.2 NVMe SSD. It's also got Gigabit Ethernet, 802.11 AC Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth 5. However, hardware can be customized while ordering. You can check the options using the link in the description. The laptop has a metallic body, and the lid is a matte gunmetal color, while the interior is matte black, and there are no sharp corners or edges anywhere. Overall, it felt quite well built compared to other Clevo units I've tested. The weight of the laptop is listed at 2.5 kilos bare bones, so expect different results based on hardware selection. Mine was basically spot on with this. And with the 180-watt power brick and cables for charging included, the total weight rises to just under 3.2 kilos. The dimensions of the laptop are 39.8 centimeters in width, 26.8 centimeters in depth, and just under 2 centimeters in height, so not too large for a 17-inch laptop. The smaller overall footprint gives us thin bezels around the screen, which are about 8mm or so based on my own measurements. The 17.3-inch 144Hz 1080p IPS level screen looks pretty good. All viewing angles were fine, however there was no G-Sync available here. I've measured the current color gamut of the screen using the Spider 5 Pro, and my results returned 97% of sRGB, 68% of NTSC, and 74% of Adobe RGB. At 100% brightness, I measured the panel at 316 nits in the center, and with a 700:1 contrast ratio. So overall, pretty good for a laptop for either gaming or other tasks like photo or video editing. I've taken a long exposure photo in a dark room as a worst case backlight bleed test, and there were some issues, particularly from the left, which could be seen while viewing darker content, but results will vary between laptop and panel. There was less screen flex than I expected, considering that the lid is on the thinner side. However, it does mostly seem to be metal, and having the hinges out towards the corners further aids stability. The laptop can just be opened up with one finger. The weight distribution is somewhat even due to the cooling towards the back and battery up the front, and I had no problems using it on my lap. Despite the thin screen bezels, the camera is found above the display in the center. The 720p camera was blurry, but not too bad, and the microphone sounded pretty good. The keyboard in my unit had 3 zones of RGB backlighting, which could be controlled through the included Control Center software. And even the secondary functions on all keys get lit up. Overall, I liked typing on the keyboard. Here's how it sounds to give you an idea of what to expect. There was a little keyboard flex while pushing down hard, which I think should be expected, given the keyboard gets removed in order to access the internals. No issues during normal use in any case. The glass touchpad has precision drivers and was excellent, same as the P960ED and P970EN. Definitely one of the smoothest feeling touchpads I've ever used. The touchpad itself does not press down, however it has physically separate left and right click buttons. It's actually got an in-glass fingerprint sensor. So after setting up Windows Hello, the touchpad will glow where you need to place your finger in order to log in, and it seemed to work fast enough. Fingerprints and dirt show up on the matte black interior, but as a smooth surface, they're easy to clean. On the left, there's the only side exhaust vent, so no hot air blowing on your hand if you're right-handed, along with most of the I/O, including the power input, HDMI 2.0 output, mini DisplayPort 1.3 output, 2 USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C ports, the first of which also has DisplayPort 1.3 available, however no Thunderbolt here, followed by a USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type-A port. On the right, there are 3.5mm headphone and microphone jacks, second USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type-A port, SD card slot, Gigabit Ethernet port, and Kensington lock. On the back, there's just air exhaust vents towards the left and right corners, while the front just has some status LEDs towards the right-hand side. Underneath, there's heaps of ventilation holes to assist airflow, and we'll see how a cooling pad can help take advantage of these soon. The 2 speakers are found on the front left and right corners and face down. They don't sound that great and were tinny at higher volumes. Here's what we're looking at in terms of max volume while playing music, and the latency mons seem to suggest it was alright. The bottom panel can be removed by taking out 12 screws with a Phillips head screwdriver. Once removed, the keyboard needs to be popped off. Just be careful as it's attached by ribbon cables. Underneath the keyboard are a further 4 screws to remove before taking off the bottom panel. Once inside, from left to right, we get access to the battery, 2 M.2 slots, 2 memory slots, Wi-Fi card, and 2.5-inch drive bay. It's pretty much the same as the P970EN I've previously covered, the difference being that the EN has 2080 Max-Q graphics. Powering the laptop is a 4-cell 62Wh battery, and with a full charge and just watching YouTube videos with the screen on half brightness, keyboard lighting off, and background apps disabled, I was able to use it for 3 hours and 54 minutes. The Intel integrated graphics were in use during this test thanks to Nvidia Optimus. While playing The Witcher 3 with medium settings and Nvidia's battery boost set to 30 FPS, the battery lasted for 1 hour and 14 minutes, and the frame rate didn't drop at any point. The result while gaming was about average, perhaps a little lower outside of gaming though, and both were just slightly ahead of the P970EN. I didn't see the battery lose charge at any point with the 180W power brick plugged in, but more on whether it's enough soon. Thermal testing was completed with an ambient room temperature of 24 degrees Celsius, so expect different temperatures in different environments. Also keep in mind there are heat pipes shared between processor and graphics, so a change in one of these will affect the other. Let's take a look at some combined CPU and GPU workloads. Starting at the bottom of the graph, at idle the temperatures were pretty good. The gaming tests were done with Watch Dogs 2, as I find it to use a good combination of CPU and GPU. While the stress tests were done by running the AIDA64 stress test and Heaven benchmark at the same time in order to attempt to fully utilize both the processor and graphics. There were no problems while gaming in my tests, and we can see that the cooling pad improved temperatures by around 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. While the temperatures were a little warmer under the worst case stress test, no thermal throttling happened at any point during my testing. There was power limit throttling, even with the CPU undervolted by minus 0.12 volts, as shown by UV on the graph. These are the average clock speeds for the same tests just shown. We're not seeing any improvement in CPU performance with the cooling pad in use, as there was no thermal throttling taking place. The CPU undervolt makes the biggest improvement, as the power limit was the main factor holding back performance. While the cooling pad doesn't necessarily help improve performance here as we're not thermal throttling, as we just saw, it does help with the temperatures if you want to run cooler. Here's what we're looking at in terms of average CPU TDP. The limit was 45 watts in Intel XTU, but I was not able to change this. The CPU undervolt lowers it a bit, though I'm not too sure why using the cooling pad lowers it further. Anyway, at stock there was only power limit throttling, no thermal throttling here. I did however see some intermittent current limit throttling before undervolting, so I'm not sure if the 180W power brick is completely adequate. I wasn't losing performance and never saw the battery drain under any load, so it seems like the power limitations in place prevent this, making the 180W brick enough. These are the clock speeds I got while just running CPU only stress tests without any GPU load, and without that combined load the results are better. There was power limit throttling at stock, which prevented the full 3.9 GHz all-core turbo speed of the i7-8750H CPU. The minus 0.12 volt undervolt allowed us to get full performance in this CPU-only stress test. I wasn't able to raise the power limit in CPU-only load here either, so that couldn't be used to improve the performance. The undervolting also improved the temperatures by 7 degrees while also improving performance at the same time. To demonstrate how this translates into practical performance, I've got some Cinebench CPU benchmarks here. Full performance was achieved with single core in either test, as power limit throttling only takes place under multi-core workloads. And once undervolted, there was a nice improvement to the multi-core score. Here are the GPU-only clock speeds while under a graphical-only stress test, and the results with a manual 100 MHz overclock applied through MSI Afterburner. There's no real difference, and this shows in the temperatures, as we're hitting power limit throttling even at stock. As for the external temperatures where you'll actually be putting your hands, at idle it was in the low 30s, fairly average. While gaming and under stress test, it got fairly warm in the center and towards the lower left of the keyboard, reaching the mid-50s between the keys, though a bit lower on the keys themselves. As for the fan noise produced by the laptop, I'll let you have a listen to some of these tests. At idle, it was close to silent, just slightly audible. While gaming or under stress test with the fans at default speeds, we can see that they were just as loud manually maxed out, as they were already running at full speed under these loads. And it was approaching the louder side here. Not too unexpected given the specs inside a thin chassis. Finally, let's take a look at some gaming benchmarks. I've tested these games with these Nvidia drivers and Windows fully updated with performance mode in the Control Center software enabled. Battlefield 5 was tested in campaign mode rather than multiplayer, as it's easier to consistently reproduce the same test run. I've got RTX on shown by the green bars and RTX off in the purple bars. With RTX on at ultra and high, it was actually quite playable for the most part, but generally you'll want higher FPS in a first-person shooter game like this, so it makes more sense to leave RTX off, considering RTX on at lower settings in my opinion looks and performs worse than it off at high. Apex Legends was tested with either all settings at maximum or all settings at the lowest settings. Even with max settings, over 100 FPS was achievable from this test, with minimum settings boosting framerate by around 15%. Honestly, I'd just play it at higher settings here and enjoy it. Far Cry New Dawn was tested with the built-in benchmark, and the results here were pretty good, actually beating out the 2080 Max-Q in the P970EN previously tested. Not too unexpected, as I've even seen the 2060 match or beat the 2080 Max-Q in this specific test. Far Cry 5 was also tested using the built-in benchmark, and the results here are above most other laptops I've tested, and above those of the newer Far Cry New Dawn just shown. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was tested with the built-in benchmark, and it was performing about as expected. Still perfectly playable at ultra settings, as this one doesn't need a high frame rate to play in my opinion. The Witcher 3 was tested with Hairworks disabled, and once again the performance was quite good here. Even with ultra settings, 90 FPS averages were possible, with around 60 for the 1% low, so easily playable, no problem while looking great. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark, with the results at higher settings lining up with other 2070 Max-Q laptops I've tested. And we'll see how this game and others compare with some other laptops shortly. CSGO was tested with the Electrical FPS benchmark, and like always, high frame rates were possible from this test, with not really a noticeable difference between minimum and medium settings. Dota 2 was tested in the middle lane with an average amount of action going on, and the results were very good, basically able to make good use of the 144Hz display even at ultra settings. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark, and tends to favour Nvidia's new Turing architecture compared to other games. And as I'm using the default built-in presets, they automatically set a 50% render scale with TAA, so the frame rates are very high here. Fortnite was tested using the replay feature, and as a well-optimized game, the frame rates from this test were very high. No problems at all running it with maximum epic settings. I'll note that the replay tested here was different to the one tested in the P970EN, so those results are not directly comparable. Overwatch is another game that is well optimized and runs on pretty much anything. At low settings, the 300 frame cap is being hit at times, while even epic settings ran very smoothly without any problems, with even the 1% low being above 100 FPS. Watch Dogs 2 is a resource-intensive game. However, as I think it plays well with a solid 30 FPS, even the near 50 FPS averages at ultra settings worked fine with no problems. Ghost Recon is another demanding game, with ultra settings always killing performance in most laptops. Though 50 FPS isn't too bad, but you can get a much smoother result at lower setting levels. PUBG was tested using the replay feature. Again, like Fortnite, the replay is unfortunately slightly different to the one used for the P970EN, as they expire over time as the game updates, so not directly comparable. Either way, still almost 100 FPS at ultra settings with 60 for the 1% low. Metro Exodus was tested with the built-in benchmark, which is known to perform worse than actual gameplay, so this is more of a synthetic test for comparing with my previous results rather than representative of what to expect in-game. Overall, the gaming performance was pretty good. In general at max settings, it wasn't quite as good as the P970EN with 2080 Max-Q. However, at lower settings, in general, I found the EF to be a little ahead due to differences in CPU speed. To get some context, let's see how it compares with some other gaming laptops. Use this information as a rough guide only, as tests were done at different times with different drivers. Here are the results from Far Cry 5 using the built-in benchmark at ultra settings, with the P970EF shown up the top in red. It's only just slightly behind the P970EN in average FPS with a larger difference to 1% lows, and only just slightly ahead of another 2070 Max-Q laptop, the Apex 15X, shown down the bottom. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, with the built-in benchmark at highest settings, the P970EF is performing about as expected, slotting right in between the other two 2070 Max-Q laptops I've tested down the bottom, while the 2080 Max-Q in the P970EN was 11% higher now in average FPS. In Battlefield 5 with ultra settings, we're seeing the P970EF coming in between the other two 2070 Max-Q laptops, with the P970EN's 2080 Max-Q 12% ahead this time in terms of average frame rate. Now for the benchmarking tools. I've tested Heaven, Valley, and Superposition from Unigine, as well as Firestrike, TimeSpy, Port Royal, and VRMark from 3D Mark. Just pause the video if you want a detailed look at these results. As we saw earlier, we've got the option of overclocking the graphics and undervolting the CPU to increase performance, so let's see how this actually helps in gaming. Far Cry 5 was retested using the built-in benchmark at 1080p, with the manual tweaks shown by the red bars. There was less of a difference in average FPS as we move up in setting levels, but a much larger boost to the 1% low performance, with our tweaks boosting this by 11% at ultra settings, while average FPS only rose 1.7% at ultra. Still, free performance though. I've used Crystal Disk Mark to test the storage, and my 500GB Samsung Evo 970 Plus was getting very nice read and write speeds. However, this will of course vary based on the storage you select. The SD card slot was tested with a V90 card, and the results were very nice, some of the best I've seen from a laptop. For updated pricing, check the links in the description, as prices will change over time. At the time of recording, in Australia the base model goes for about 2,600 Australian dollars, though 100 more to get dual channel memory. For my international viewers, that's under $1,700 US if you remove our taxes, although stuff in Australia still tends to cost more. This puts it around 1,000 Australian dollars under the P970EN with 2080 Max-Q graphics, so you'll have to decide if the extra is worth it. As mentioned, in some games, I saw almost no difference, while in others the EN was 11 to 12% faster in average frame rate. So what did you guys think about the Metabox Prime S P970EF gaming laptop? Like the P960ED and P970EN I've recently covered, I think it's a pretty good clever laptop, and definitely a step up compared to what was available previously. The thin bezel design is appreciated, the glass touchpad with fingerprint scanner was nice, and it's got powerful specs, considering it's just 2 cm thick with decent build quality. Despite the thinner build, it doesn't get too hot considering the specs, and we could improve things with some simple tweaks as shown. The backlight bleed was more significant here than I would have liked, but that varies by panel and laptop, so hard to say for sure how that is in a general sense. The performance overall was pretty good, performing in line with other 2070 Max-Q laptops. Or in the case of the thermally throttled Gigabyte Aero 15X9, it's actually performing better for a much cheaper price. Here in Australia, for these specs, the price is honestly quite impressive. Yeah, the larger brands generally have better build quality and overall the finish seems more premium, but that's nothing new when it comes to these clever units. I think Metabox are providing a good value machine here for the specs that you get. Let me know what you guys thought about the Metabox Prime S P970EF laptop down in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, get subscribed for future tech videos like this one.